Good day, everyone. I am Angeline C. Bandalan. So now I will be talking about the history of linguistics. Linguistics is the scientific study of language. It involves an analysis of language form, language meaning, and language in text. Traditions of Arabic grammar and Hebrew grammar developed during the Middle Ages in a religious context like Panini-Sanskrit grammar. Linguistics began to be studied systematically by the ancient scholar Panini in the 6th century BCE. Beginning around the 4th century BCE, Warring State period China also developed its own grammatical traditions. Aristotle laid the foundation of Western linguistics as part of the study of rhetoric in his Poetica in 335 BC. Modern approaches began to develop in the 18th century when the classical discipline of rhetoric was gradually removed. During the 19th century, linguistics came to be regarded as belonging to the discipline of psychology or biology, and such views remain the foundation of today's mainstream Anglo-American linguistics. Each of these subfields can be approached either synchronically or diachronically. They were, however, contested in the early 20th century by Ferdinand de Saussure, who established linguistics as the autonomous discipline within social sciences. Following Saussure's concept, general linguistics consists of the study of language as a semiotic system, which includes the subfields of phonology, morphology, syntax, and semantics. So now we'll be talking about the timeline of history of linguistics. So the first one is the 2000 BCE Babylonian tradition, 4,000 years before the present. The earliest linguistic text written in cuneiform on clay tablets, or in 4,000 years before the present. In southern Mesopotamia, there arose a grammatical tradition that lasted more than 2,500 years. The linguistic texts from the earliest parts of this tradition were a list of nouns in Sumerian. It was being replaced in everyday speech by a very different language, Akkadian. It remained, however, as a prestigious language and continued to be used in religious and legal contexts. The second one is the Hindu traditions in 1000 BC. The Hindu tradition of linguistics had its origin in the first millennium BC and was simulated by changes in Sanskrit, or Indo-European India, and sacred language of religious texts. Ritual record the exact verb performance of the religious text, and grammatical traditions emerged that set out rules for the ancient language. The best-known grammarian from this tradition is Panini, whose grammar covered phonetic and morphology. So the third one is the Greek linguistics in 5th century BC onwards. The Greek tradition included the origins of the languages, parts of the speech systems, the relationship between the language and thoughts, and two aspects of word sign connected by nature or inconicity or by convention or arbitrary. The first surviving grammar of a European language is a short description of Greek by Dionysius Thrax, Technique Grammatic in 100 BC. This work threatened phonetics and morphology. Roman traditions, 1st century BC to approximately 500 AD. The primary interest was in morphology, parts of speech, the form of nouns and verbs. Syntax was ignored. Roman linguistic Varro produced a multi-volume grammar of Latin, of which only about a quarter has survived. Later grammars of Donatus and Priscan were highly influential in the Middle Ages. In July 18, 700 Arabic and Hebrew traditions, 7th century. The Greek grammatical tradition had a strong influence on the Arabic tradition and focused on morphology and accurate phonetic description. Its beginnings are considered to be in the 7th century AD, with the work of Abu al-Aswad. The Arabic tradition serves in turn as a major influence on the Hebrew traditions. Later in the 9th century, Saadia ben Joseph produced the first grammar and dictionary of Hebrew. So in March 21, 1000, Middle Ages in Europe in 500 to 1400 AD. In Europe, Latin was held in high esteem as the language of the public sphere, as the primary written language. Pedagogic grammars of Latin for native speakers of other languages began appearing. In about 1000, an abbot in Britain wrote a grammar of Latin for Anglo-Saxon speaking children. The 12th century saw the emergence of the notion of the universal nature of grammar held by Bacon. In March 21, 1600, European colonialism in 1400 AD. Colonization brought Europeans into contact with a variety of language in Africa, the Americas, Asia, and the Pacific. Information about them was gathered by explorers, colonial administrators, travelers, missionaries. Scholars compiled words lists in many languages and used them in language comparisons. It emerged the notions that most European languages form a family of related languages. William Jones discovered the relatedness of the Indo-European and the founding of comparative linguistics.
Good day everyone, my name is Winton L. Bannister and today I will be going to continue the discussion of the timeline of the history of linguistics. March 21, 1700s, European colonialism. The Danish linguist Rasmus Rask drew together the various threads of historical linguistics of the period into coherent system of principles of establishing the relatedness of languages. He stressed the importance of grammatical evidence and of regular sound correspondence between related words. Grammar of European languages were written and missionaries played an important role. March 21, 1800s. Modern linguistics beginnings. The Swiss linguistic Ferdinand de Saussure is acknowledged as the key figure and the founding father of modern linguistics. Modern linguistics focused on the idea that a language can be viewed as a self-contained and structured system situated at a particular point in time. He championed the idea that language is a system of arbitrary signs, and his conceptualization of the sign has been highly influential. March 21, 1895. Diversification. The Prague School. Roman Jacobson. The Prague School is a tradition of linguistic thought. It was a group of Czech and other linguists who formed the Linguistics Circle of Prague. This group held regular meetings and published a journal. Its primary interest was phonological theory. It also made contributions to syntax. The most famous representative was Roman Jacobson. March 21, 1900s. British structuralism. Daniel Jones took up and extended Swift's work on phonetics. J.R. Firth held the first chair in linguistics in the University of London. He brought a number of original and provocative perspectives of linguistics. He established the London School. March 22, 1940. Danish structuralism. The Copenhagen School was headed by Louis Hjelmslev, who developed an approach called glossematics. Glossematics focus on the relations between units in the language system. It is an algebraic theory of language. March 22, 1950. American structuralism. Franz Boas, Edward Sapir, and Leonard Bloomfield were responsible for setting American linguistics on its course. Both gathered information on the languages and cultures Native Americans. He upheld the notion that all languages should be described in their own terms. He mandated psychological and anthropological orientations, seeing language as intimately connected with the way of life and thought of its speakers. Bloomfield established linguistics as a science. March 22, 1955. Contemporary approaches to linguistics. The schools of linguistics continued to proliferate in the 20th century. It is usual to divide the vast array of approaches into two primary types, formal and functional, according to whether they adopt an overall focus on form or on function. March 22, 1957. Formal Linguistics. In 1957 appeared the publication of Noam Chomsky, 1928, Syntactic Structures Influenced by Recent Developments in Mathematical Logic. Grammar is considered to be a formal system making explicit the mechanisms, first in terms of rules, later by order means, and for this reason, the tradition is called generative. In America, March 22, 1960. Functional linguistics. In opposition to Chomskyan linguistics, was functional grammar, developed from the late 1960s by the Dutch linguist Simon Dick. The Greenbergian tradition is one of the least functional of the functionalist schools, being functional more in its opposition to generative grammar than in its ideas. Functionalist schools have been more willing to accept and integrate typological and language universal research than mainstream formal linguistics. September 8, 1960. Scope of modern linguistics. Generative grammar continues as a major force guiding their orientations and goals. Besides, other theories have also had some impact. Technological developments have facilitated the task of language since the beginning of the 20th century. It includes audio and video recorders and computers, as well as in the computational field, including the machine generation and recognition of speech, automatic processing of text, translation, and building and maintaining large corpora.